Quality, comfort, and grip at an affordable price. Whether it's our standard, pro, or elite socks, there's an option for everyone. Try a pair for yourself now at puregripsocks.com.
I don't know that I can confidently say that these are the most comfortable football boots I've ever worn, but they're easily a tie for first place. Where I'm sure regular viewers of the channel have already guessed which brand these are from, and I've been accused of being overly positive towards Mizuno in the past, but if you've ever tried any of their leather made in Japan products in particular, the praise is well deserved. And not that I feel the need to defend myself, but if you saw my review on the two main boots as part of the new innovation pack, I ultimately concluded that while cool, they're not very innovative and they're kind of unnecessary and also not as good as the originals. Having said that, the boots in this box, while a little bit strange in some ways, are undeniably incredible. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the limited edition Mizuno Morelia Proto. They are one of 4 boots in the new innovation pack that, as the name would suggest, are kind of a prototype take on the classic Morelia, hence the all-over super soft kangaroo leather upper. But as you can see, the Runbird logo has been shifted back a little bit. They've incorporated an off-centered lacing system, which we don't often see from Mizuno, and somewhat unusually, they decided to pair it up with their AG sole plate and stud pattern. With this made in Japan football boot retailing for a somewhat eye-watering $300, which I understand is absolutely insane for a single pair of boots, but these might just be the most worth it $300 football boots that have ever existed. Where I'll say it right off the bat, even though these are part of the innovation pack, there's very little about the Protos that I would consider to be innovative. So if you hear that word and you're expecting something high tech, you might be a little bit disappointed because these are about as low tech as football boots can get. But when it comes to fit, comfort, touch on the ball, and just the general experience of playing in what feels like the softest leather slippers you've ever had on your feet, I'm not sure that there is anything on the market that even comes close to these. Well, actually, maybe the Morelia 2 Japan comes pretty close, but in terms of what you can buy right now, in my opinion, this is the most comfortable football boot on the market. We're going to discuss why I believe that's the case, how these differ from a standard pair of Morelias, how they fit and feel on feet, and ultimately conclude why it is incredibly disappointing that these are only available in limited quantities. Mizuno, if you're watching, please do not make this a one-off, and if you're going to make more, let's get some with an FG stud pattern. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around, watch the entire review, and if you are interested in a pair for yourself, if there are any still available, check out that first link down below, and all available pairs will be linked on that page. And as always, if you guys enjoy the content, don't forget to drop a like on the video, and if you appreciate the unsponsored, unsugar-coated, brutally honest opinions on this channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2025. So first things first, let's start off with what is ultimately kind of a weird decision by Mizuno in that they gave us this prototype Morelia upper, but they paired it up with their AG sole plate and stud pattern that can be found on much less expensive boots like the Mizuno Alpha 2 Elite, exact same sole plate and stud pattern. These retail for $140, these retail for more than double at $300. Granted, it's not a deal breaker in the sense that I think this is a bad sole plate and stud pattern. For use specifically on artificial grass, I think it's fantastic. And in general, the sole plate is more on the flexible side, which I think works with the more traditional all kangaroo leather upper that the Morelia Proto has. I think the issue is if you wanted this football boot and regularly play on natural grass, especially if the ground is a little bit softer, the studs, simply put, are just going to be too short. On hard ground, the stud pattern actually works really well. If you play on a pitch that doesn't actually have a lot of grass, this is also an ideal stud pattern. But if you need that stud length for digging into the playing surface, these studs, like I said, are just on the shorter side, and at the end of the day, are ultimately best suited for use on artificial grass. Had they paired this Morelia Proto upper with the sole plate and stud pattern from the Morelia Neo, then we'd have something even even more special. Whether or not that'll actually ever happen, I suppose we'll have to wait and see. As for the upper, to the untrained eye, these look no different than the boots you've seen your local referee wear, but in reality, this is an all-new kangaroo leather upper construction bearing the Morelia name. Whereas you can see side by side with an actual Morelia 2, this by the way being from that innovation pack, having a Wagyu leather upper, which also isn't innovative because they've actually done that before. It's not exactly the same thing. In fact, I'd argue that these are very different in the sense that the leather is much thinner on the Morelia Protos, and of course that off-centered lacing system, leaving this area free of any obstruction or even a Mizuno Runbird logo, it gives this boot such a pure sensation on the ball that it's almost hard to put into words. Because if you've ever had a pair of made in Japan Morelia 2s, this being one of my personal favorites, a go-to that I wear when I'm not testing out new products, it's hard to play in these football boots and criticize the touch on the ball. The all-over kangaroo leather is just fantastic, but something about this design and the way that the upper wraps your foot just feels so incredibly special. Where the one thing that I really noticed about these is that normally in a pair of football boots, when you try to tie the laces as tight as you can, there comes a point where they just squeeze your feet uncomfortably and they don't feel as good as if they were just a little bit looser. This football boot, with the way that the laces are routed and the way that they've done the shaping of the upper, for whatever reason, the tighter you pull on the laces, the closer it wraps your foot and the more comfortable they become. I know leather football boots are known for molding to the exact shape of your feet and giving you that kind of second skin fit to a certain extent, but I'm not sure that I've experienced that second skin sensation to the extent that the Morelia Protos have on offer. This is easily the best fitting football boot I've had on my feet in quite some time. Where if I had to compare it to something else in regards to fit and comfort, it would be another one of my all-time favorites in the Mizuno Wave Cups. Another football boot where I'd argue it's an absolute shame that Mizuno does not make these a regular offering in their lineup. As for the kangaroo leather itself, like I mentioned, it's a little bit thinner than that of the classic Morelia 2, but about the same thickness as what you'd find on the Morelia Neo, so definitely on the thinner side, but still incredibly soft and pliable as you'd expect from any made in Japan product. It flows pretty much seamlessly into the midfoot, which gives you such a clean touch on the ball. It also flows on the lateral side of the foot as well, with the Mizuno Runbird logo being your singular kind of synthetic element that adds a little bit of reinforcement. And then you can see wrapping around the back of the heel is another piece of synthetic leather that sits directly on top of an internal plastic heel counter. And then something I'm not in love with from a looks perspective is this glossy kind of ridge synthetic at the back. I just think it looks a little bit cheap considering how premium this leather comes across in person. Something kind of interesting, because it's been a bit of a trend when it comes to modern leather football boots, is less stitching. Obviously Mizuno have gone in the opposite direction as a means of reinforcing this particular kangaroo leather upper. The inside lining material is gold in color as you'd find on most of their made in Japan kangaroo leather products, so no major differences there. If you've worn kangaroo leather from Mizuno in the past, you kind of know what to expect with these. Just expect something even that much softer in terms of how it wraps the entirety of your foot. The off-centered lacing system is kind of reminiscent of the Mizuno Rebula series, where side by side with the Rebula 3, I don't think the lacing systems look that similar, but they're kind of what they made me think of, even though I also think the Morelia Proto is just significantly more comfortable than the Rebulas ever were. And then to add to the comfort, they've actually gone for a synthetic material for the tongue, which is kind of an unusual choice, but you can see it's backed by this really soft memory foam basically through the entire middle section that just has the perfect level of thickness and sponginess that when you tie the laces tight, it just gives you that little bit of cushion to not feel them across the top of your foot whatsoever, but still allow you to get that tight wrap that is so important for a football boot that has an upper as soft as this one does. It's a little detail, but it's one of those elements that just feels so incredibly well designed. And then moving to the rear of the boot, boot, like every other Mizuno product, this does feature a low-cut design. If you look at it side by side with the classic Morelia, it does come up a little bit higher on the back and sides, but I wouldn't say that's particularly noticeable when playing in the boots. The heel liner is this incredibly soft material that, again, Mizuno only seems to use on their most special products. It's kind of an in-between of like a synthetic leather and a micro suede in that it's incredibly soft to the touch, but at the same time it grips your socks really nicely and just generally feels super comfortable. There's not a ton of padding in this heel area either, especially down low, but the fit, the comfort, the lockdown, it's as close to perfect as I think you're going to experience in a pair of football boots. And then the insole, fully removable. I'll give you guys a quick look at that. It, like the rest of the innovation pack, features this soft suede material on the surface, and then it's made from a single layer of black foam with, of course, your Morelia branding. And then there's the weight, where even though it's not a perfect comparison given the differences in sole plate and stud pattern, I thought it'd be interesting to see how the Morelia Proto compares to a standard made in Japan Morelia 2, both in the same size 9.5 US. We'll start off with the classic Morelia 2, and you can see that they weigh in at 7.5 ounces, the equivalent of 213 grams, a lot lighter than I think a lot of people might expect from a boot of this type. And then we'll throw on the Morelia Protos that do have a little bit of mud on them, so you can probably add a couple extra grams, but they weigh in at 7.65 ounces, the equivalent of 217 grams. Again, not a perfect comparison given the sole plate differences, but they're basically the exact same weight and both a lot lighter than I think most people would expect a full kangaroo leather upper football boot to be. When it comes to fit and feel on feet, something that I've always said is that comfort is very much subjective in the sense that everybody likes the feel of something a little bit different. But if leather and softness is your thing, this is pretty much as good as it gets. Like any football boots, but especially ones made from natural leather, you can expect somewhat of a break-in process and that the leather is going to soften up and mold to the shape of your feet. But because these are so soft out of the box, it's almost crazy to say that these require break-in time, because the first time that you slip them on your feet, if you don't think they're the most comfortable thing you've ever worn, I'd almost have to question your judgment, because they really are that incredibly soft. They are football boots that I can only describe as disappearing on your feet, where with the laces tied tight, they wrap your feet so perfectly, and because the kangaroo leather is so soft, they give you that speed boot lightness in the sense that there is nothing digging into any part of your foot. The flexibility is so natural, and the touch on the ball really ends up feeling like a second skin with that little bit of softness from the kangaroo leather. The experience, to say the least, is just special. Where I guess if I had to compare them to another pair of football boots, it would be something along the lines of the classic Morelia 2, but I would say that those football boots have much more of a traditional sensation compared to these, in the sense that they are a little bit thicker, they do have a little bit more padding to them, and I don't think the shaping is quite as modern as what you're going to get from these Protos, in that even with the off-centered lacing system, what you often find is that this large surface area on the inside of the foot can kind of bunch up and crease and pull away from your foot, but the design, shaping, and materials used are all so perfectly done that everything just feels like it is glued to your feet at all times in the most comfortable way possible. From a width and sizing perspective, these definitely have some decent width to them because of that more traditional U-throat construction. The opening is nice and big, and because that lacing system, even though it's off-centered, runs nice and deep, you have plenty of adjustability. So whether you have wide or narrow feet, I genuinely think these are going to work well for just about everybody. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length seems to be perfect. Granted, the leather will stretch a little bit if you're wearing your boots maybe a little bit on the bigger side right now. Going half a size down wouldn't be a terrible idea, but if you're currently wearing, for example, like I am, a 9.5 in the Morelia 2s, I would recommend sticking true to size and going for the exact same size with the Morelia Protos. If you're a true football boot enthusiast, at one point or another, you've probably worn a new pair of boots to bed. This is a pair that you wear to bed to actually be more comfortable. So in conclusion, if I'm playing on artificial grass or on harder natural grass and I'm not testing out anything new, these are the boots that you'll find on my feet. The fit, comfort, and touch on the ball, if you're a fan of kangaroo leather football boots, is genuinely second to none. And like I said earlier in the video, if Mizuno leaves this as a one-off release and we never see it again, it's gonna be the biggest disappointment of 2025. These are way too good to not continue to produce.